The year was 2347, and humanity had spread across the stars like seeds carried by cosmic winds. They had built colonies on distant worlds, made friends with alien species, and learned that the universe was far stranger than their ancestors had ever imagined. But nothing in 300 years of space travel had prepared them for what waited in the dark corners of the Andromeda sector. The diplomatic vessel, Horizon's Edge, was a small ship, built for talking rather than fighting. It carried a crew of 42 humans, all of them trained in the art of making peace with species that looked nothing like them. Captain Lisa Monroe stood on the bridge and watched the stars blur past the windows. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her brown hair and eyes that had seen too many negotiations go wrong. "We are entering Noctari space," said the navigation officer, a young man named Kevin Palmer. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking slightly over his console. Lisa nodded. She understood his fear. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Noctari. They were ancient beings who drank blood to survive. They had ruled their empire for over 15,000 years, and in all that time, no species had ever made a successful treaty with them. Diplomats who entered their space usually did not come back. "Stay calm," Lisa said to her crew. "We are here to talk. That is all we are here to do." But she knew, deep in her bones, that talking might not be enough. In the back of the ship, far from the bridge, a man named Daniel Carter sat in his small cabin and read from an old book. He was not a diplomat or a soldier. He was a linguistic specialist, someone who studied languages both living and dead. He had joined this mission because the Noctari spoke a tongue that fascinated him, a language so old that parts of it had been forgotten even by its speakers. Daniel was not a handsome man. He was thin and pale, with messy dark hair and glasses that he constantly pushed up his nose. He preferred books to people, puzzles to conversations. Most of the crew thought he was strange. He did not mind. He had been strange his whole life. His door opened, and a woman stepped inside. Her name was Maria Santos, and she was the ship's cultural advisor. She had dark skin, kind eyes, and a smile that could calm angry aliens. "We are almost there," Maria said. "The captain wants everyone ready." Daniel closed his book and looked at her. "Do you think they will let us speak before they kill us?" Maria laughed, but the sound was nervous. "That is not funny, Daniel. I was not joking," he said. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and suddenly they were surrounded. Noctari vessels filled the space around them, black ships with red markings that looked like dried blood. They were beautiful in a terrible way, like predators waiting to strike. A voice came through the communication system. It was cold and smooth, like ice sliding over stone. "Human vessel, you have entered the domain of the Crimson Sovereign. You will follow us. Do not resist." Captain Lisa ordered her crew to comply. There was no point in fighting. The Noctari ships could destroy them in seconds. The Horizon's Edge was guided toward a massive station that floated in the darkness, a structure so large that it could have held a small moon inside it. When the ship docked, soldiers came aboard. The Noctari were tall and pale, with sharp features and eyes that were completely black. They wore armor the color of old blood and carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. They said nothing as they gathered the humans and led them off the ship. Daniel walked with the others, his eyes moving constantly. He was not looking at the soldiers. He was looking at the walls. The station was old, far older than the Noctari Empire itself. And carved into the black stone were inscriptions, words in a language he had never seen before. His heart began to beat faster. Not from fear, but from excitement. Here was a puzzle, a mystery waiting to be solved. The humans were taken through long corridors and grand halls, past statues of Noctari rulers and paintings of ancient wars. Everything was dark and cold, lit only by dim red lights that cast strange shadows on the walls. Finally, they reached a massive door made of metal that looked like frozen night. The door opened, and they were pushed inside. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into darkness. Pillars of black crystal lined the walls, and at the far end of the room sat a throne made of bones. Real bones, from creatures that had died long ago. And on that throne sat the Vampire Queen. She was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Daniel had ever seen. Her skin was white as fresh snow. Her hair was black as the void between stars. And her eyes were pools of absolute darkness that seemed to pull at his soul. She wore a gown of deep crimson that flowed around her like liquid fire, and when she smiled, her fangs gleamed in the low light. This was the Crimson Sovereign, the ruler of the Noctari, the monster who had killed thousands and started wars for entertainment. She had ruled for over 10,000 years, and in all that time, no one had ever controlled her. She did what she wanted when she wanted, and the galaxy trembled at her name. "Humans," she said, and her voice filled the entire room without effort. "How delightful! It has been so long since I had new toys to play with." Captain Lisa stepped forward, her chin high despite her fear. "I am Captain Lisa Monroe of the Earth Alliance. We come in peace, seeking to establish diplomatic relations with your empire." The Queen laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass, beautiful and dangerous. She rose from her throne and descended the steps toward the humans. Her movements were fluid, like a predator stalking prey that could not escape. "Peace," she repeated, as if the word amused her. "Your species is young. You do not understand what peace costs in this part of the galaxy." She walked among the humans, studying them with those terrible black eyes. Some of the crew trembled. Others looked away. One man began to cry silently. The Queen drank in their fear like fine wine. Then she reached Daniel. He was not looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the walls behind the throne, on the ancient inscriptions carved into the stone. His lips moved silently as he tried to work out the meaning of the symbols. The Queen stopped. For the first time in centuries, someone was ignoring her. She gripped his chin with cold fingers and forced him to meet her gaze. Her eyes tried to pull him in, to drown him in darkness. But Daniel merely blinked, his mind still half lost in the puzzle of those ancient words. "You do not fear me, little human?" She whispered. Daniel looked at her with honest confusion. "Should I be afraid? I was trying to read those inscriptions. Do you know what language they are written in?" The throne room went completely silent. No one had ever spoken to the Crimson Sovereign like that. No one had ever treated her like an interruption. The Queen's smile grew wider, showing more of her fangs. "Interesting," she said. "Very interesting indeed." She released his chin and turned to her guards. "Take the others to the cells. This one stays with me." Captain Lisa tried to protest, but the guards dragged them away. Daniel watched his crewmates disappear through the doors. And then he was alone with the most dangerous being in the galaxy. The Vampire Queen circled him slowly, like a cat examining a mouse that had forgotten to run. "What is your name, little human?" "Daniel Carter," he said. "I study languages." "Languages," she repeated. "How wonderfully useless. Tell me, Daniel Carter, why should I not drain you right now and add your blood to my collection?" Daniel considered the question seriously. "Because I might be able to read those inscriptions for you. They look older than your empire. Are you not curious what they say?" The Queen stopped circling. Something flickered in her dark eyes. Something that might have been surprise or interest or both. "You are either very brave or very stupid," she said. "I have been told it is usually the second one," Daniel admitted. The Queen laughed again. But this time the sound was different. Less cruel, more genuine. She had not laughed like that in a very long time. "You may live for now, Daniel Carter," she said. "Let us see what secrets you can find in my walls." And so began the strangest relationship in the history of human-alien contact. A vampire queen who had never been controlled, and a quiet linguist who did not know he was supposed to be afraid. The Crimson Sovereign descended from her throne like a shadow come to life. Every step she took was perfect, calculated to draw the eye and freeze the heart. She had spent thousands of years learning how to terrify, how to seduce, how to break the strongest wills with nothing more than her presence. And now she had a new project. Daniel stood in the center of the throne room, watching her approach. He should have been afraid. Every other creature in the galaxy would have been trembling by now. But his mind was still stuck on those inscriptions, those beautiful ancient symbols that no one had read in centuries. "You are strange, little human," the queen said, stopping just inches away from him. Her cold breath touched his face. "Most beings cannot even meet my eyes. Yet you look at me like I am a book to be studied." "Everyone is a kind of book," Daniel said simply. "Some are just harder to read than others." The queen tilted her head, her black hair falling like a curtain of night. "And what do you read when you look at me?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I see someone who has lived a very long time. Someone who is very tired of being feared." No one had ever said anything like that to her. For a moment, something flickered across her perfect face. Surprise, confusion, perhaps even pain. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual cold smile. "You presume too much," she said. "I am the Crimson Sovereign. I have crushed empires beneath my heel. I have drunk the blood of kings and queens from 100 worlds. I am not tired of being feared. Fear is the only language the universe understands." "Maybe," Daniel said. "But languages change over time. Perhaps the universe is ready for a new one." The queen stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the walls. "You humans are so amusing," she said. "So full of hope and foolishness. It is almost refreshing." She turned and walked back toward her throne, her gown flowing behind her like blood on water. "You will stay in my personal chambers," she announced. "You will work on translating those inscriptions. And you will entertain me when I grow bored." "What about my crew?" Daniel asked. "What will happen to them?" The queen waved her hand dismissively. "They will remain in the cells for now. Their fate depends entirely on you, Daniel Carter. Keep me interested, and they might live. Bore me, and well." She smiled, showing her fangs. "I do get hungry." Guards came and took Daniel through a series of corridors, each one more luxurious than the last. The queen's personal chambers were a vast space filled with treasures from conquered worlds. There were paintings that moved when you looked at them, statues carved from materials that did not exist on Earth, and books written in languages that had died before humanity learned to write. Daniel was given a small room connected to the main chamber. It had a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out into the endless darkness of space. He sat on the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. He was a prisoner of the most dangerous being in the galaxy. His crew was locked in cells, their lives depending on his ability to keep a vampire queen entertained. And somehow, despite all of this, the only thing he could think about was those inscriptions. There was something about them, something important. He could feel it in his bones. The next few days established a strange routine. Daniel would spend his mornings studying the inscriptions, making notes and trying to connect the symbols to languages he already knew. The queen would watch him work, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just sitting in silence. She tried to break him, of course. That was what she did to everyone. On the third night, she appeared in his room without warning. She was wearing almost nothing, her pale skin glowing in the dim light. She moved toward him with the grace of a predator, her eyes filled with dark promises. Are you not lonely, Daniel? She whispered, her lips nearly touching his ear. Are you not cold, sleeping alone in this room? I could keep you warm. I could show you pleasures that humans have never known. Daniel looked at her, then looked back at his notes. I am trying to work out this symbol, he said, pointing at a particular inscription. I think it might be a verb, but the conjugation is unusual. Do you have any historical records that might help? The Queen stared at him. No one had ever ignored her seduction before. No one had ever treated her beauty as less interesting than a puzzle. She grabbed his notes and threw them across the room. You will look at me when I speak to you, she hissed, her fangs extended. You will give me the attention I deserve. Daniel met her eyes calmly. I am sorry if I offended you, but I find languages very interesting. More interesting than most things, honestly. It is not personal. For a moment, the Queen looked like she might kill him. Her claws extended, her eyes burned with ancient fury. Then slowly she pulled back. You are not like other beings, she said, and her voice was different now. Quieter, almost curious. No, Daniel agreed. I have been told that many times. The Queen picked up his scattered notes and handed them back to him. Her movements were careful, almost gentle. This symbol you're asking about, she said, pointing at the one he had mentioned. I have seen something like it in the old archives. I will have the records brought to you. Thank you, Daniel said. She left without another word. Daniel stayed up all night, working on his translations, unaware that he had just done something impossible. He had made the Crimson Sovereign curious. The next few weeks continued in this pattern. The Queen tried every method she knew to control Daniel. She used fear, appearing suddenly with blood on her lips, describing in detail what she would do to his crewmates if he displeased her. She used pain, sometimes cutting him just to watch him bleed, testing his limits. She used pleasure, offering herself to him in ways that would have driven most beings mad with desire. But Daniel was not most beings. His mind was wired differently than others. Humans, the Noctari discovered, had a natural resistance to psychic manipulation. Their thoughts were chaotic, jumping from one thing to another in ways that made them hard to control. And Daniel's mind was stranger still. He was so focused on patterns and puzzles that the Queen's attempts to dominate him simply slid away. Like water off glass. Instead of breaking, he started asking questions. How old is your empire, really? He asked one evening, while she sat watching him work. The official histories say 15,000 years, but these inscriptions suggest something older. The official histories say what I want them to say, the Queen replied. But what is the truth? She was silent for a long moment. No one asked her about truth. People asked for mercy, for power, for death. Never for truth. The empire is older than I am, she finally said. There were rulers before me, but their names have been forgotten. Why? Because I wanted them forgotten. She looked at him with those endless black eyes. When I took the throne, I erased everything that came before. The old rulers, the old ways, the old language. I made myself the beginning of history. Daniel nodded slowly, making a note. That explains why these inscriptions are so hard to read. They are from the time before you, the time you tried to erase. The Queen leaned forward, her interest sharpening. Can you read them? I am starting to, Daniel said. It is slow work, but the language is beautiful. Whoever wrote these was very skilled. They were my enemies, the Queen said. They tried to stop me from taking the throne. I killed them all, yet you kept their words on your walls. She was quiet for a moment. I kept them as a reminder, a trophy. I never thought anyone would actually read them. Daniel looked at her, and for the first time, he saw past the monster. He saw the loneliness underneath, the isolation of a being who had destroyed everyone who might have understood her. Would you like me to tell you what they say? he asked gently. When I finished translating, the queen's face changed. For just a second, she looked vulnerable. Then the mask came back, cold and beautiful and cruel. Perhaps, she said, if you live long enough to finish. But Daniel heard what she did not say. She wanted to know. She wanted someone to help her remember the past she had tried so hard to destroy. And in that moment, he realized that the vampire queen was not uncontrollable because she was strong. She was uncontrollable because she was afraid. Afraid of her past, afraid of her memories, afraid of who she had been before she became a monster. Daniel returned to his work with new purpose. Those inscriptions held a secret, something the queen had buried long ago, and he was going to find it. A month passed in the chambers of the Crimson Sovereign. Daniel worked on his translations during the day and talked with the queen during the long nights. She stopped trying to seduce him after the first few weeks. Instead, she simply stayed near him, watching, listening, sometimes helping him find old records in the archives. Thought it was strange, this thing growing between them. It was not love, not exactly. It was not friendship either. It was something new, something that had no name in any language. Daniel knew. The queen began telling him stories dotted small. A mention of a battle she had fought centuries ago. A description of a planet she had conquered, how beautiful it had been before she burned it. Then the stories grew deeper, darker, more personal. I was not always like this, she said one night, sitting by the window that looked out at the stars. Her voice was soft, almost human. When I was young, before I took the throne, I was different. Daniel set down his notes and gave her his full attention. He had learned that these moments were rare and precious. The queen rarely let anyone see past her mask. What were you like? He asked. Thought she was quiet for a long time. I was a warrior, she finally said. One of many. The Noctari were at war then, fighting for survival against species that wanted to destroy us. I fought because I wanted to protect my people. I believed in honor and duty and sacrifice. What changed? Her eyes grew darker, if that was possible. The old rulers betrayed us. They made a deal with our enemies, sold our people into slavery to save themselves. I discovered the truth and led a rebellion. We won. I killed the traitors with my own hands. She looked down at those hands, pale and perfect and stained with memories of blood. After that, I became the new ruler. But I was not the same person anymore. I had seen what trust and hope could lead to: betrayal, pain, death. So, I decided to become something that could never be betrayed. A monster. Daniel said quietly, yes. She met his eyes without flinching. A monster that everyone feared, that no one could ever hurt. I erased my past, my name, everything that made me weak. I became the Crimson Sovereign, and I ruled through terror because terror was the only thing I could believe in. Daniel nodded slowly. But you kept the inscriptions. I kept them, she agreed. Even though they were written by the people I destroyed. Even though reading them could undo everything I built. I kept them because... She paused, searching for words. Because some part of me wanted to be found. Wanted someone to see past the monster and remember who I used to be. And has anyone ever tried? She laughed, but the sound was sad. Many have tried. Diplomats, scholars, lovers. They all came thinking they could tame me, control me, change me. I killed them all. Not because they failed, but because they wanted to use me. They did not want to know me. They wanted to own me. She looked at Daniel with an expression he could not read. You are different. You do not want anything from me. You just want to solve your puzzle. Is that bad? Daniel asked. No. Her voice was almost gentle. It is the first honest thing anyone has offered me in 10,000 years. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars drift past the window. Then Daniel said, I think I am getting close to finishing the translation. There are few sections I still cannot understand, but the main text is almost complete. The Queen tensed. What have you found? It is a historical record, Daniel said carefully. Written by the people who lived here before your empire. They were documenting their civilization, their culture, their leaders. They knew they were going to lose the war against you, so they wrote everything down. They wanted to preserve their memory. Their memory, the Queen repeated. Is that all? Daniel hesitated. He could sense that he was approaching something important, something the Queen both wanted and feared to hear. There's a section about you, he finally said. About who you were before the war. Before you became the Crimson Sovereign. The Queen stood up suddenly, her body rigid with tension. Destroy it, she said. Burn your notes. Forget what you have read. I do not think I can do that, Daniel said calmly. I am ordering you to do it. Her voice was cold again, the voice of the monster. I am the queen of this empire. You are my prisoner. You will obey me. Daniel shook his head. You brought me here because you wanted someone to read those inscriptions. You kept them on your walls for 12,000 years, waiting for someone who could understand them. Now that I finally can, you want me to pretend I cannot? You do not understand, the Queen hissed. That past is dead. That person is dead. I killed her myself. Maybe, Daniel said. Or maybe she is just sleeping, waiting for someone to call her name. The Queen moved faster than Daniel could see. One moment she was across the room. The next, she had him pinned against the wall, her hand around his throat, her fangs inches from his face. I could kill you right now, she whispered. I could drain every drop of blood from your body and feed your corpse to my guards. I could make your death last for days. Daniel did not struggle. He did not beg. He just looked at her with those calm, curious eyes. Yes, he said. You could. But you will not. How do you know that? Because if you wanted me dead, I would already be dead. You have had 100 chances to kill me. You have not taken any of them. I think you want me to finish the translation. I think you want to know what those inscriptions say about you. The Queen's grip tightened. Then slowly, it loosened. She stepped back, releasing him, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. You are the most frustrating creature I've ever met, she said. I have been told that before, Daniel replied. Rubbing his throat dot, she turned away from him and walked to the window. For a long time, she stood there, looking out at the universe she had conquered. There was a time, she said finally, when I had a name. A real name, given to me by my parents. It was a beautiful name, from the old language that no one speaks anymore. When the first became the sovereign, I erased it. I destroyed every record, killed everyone who remembered it. I thought that if I could erase the name, I could erase the person. Did it work? Daniel asked. For a while. For a long while. She touched the cold glass of the window. But some nights, I dream about that name. I hear it whispered in voices I cannot see. And I remember what it felt like to be that person. To believe in honor and love and hope. She turned back to face him. What does the inscription say about me, Daniel? What name did those ancient writers preserve? Daniel took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. The moment that would change everything. I do not know yet, he said honestly. That section is the most damaged part of the text. I need more time to work on it. The Queen studied his face for any sign of deception. She found none. Then work, she said. Finish your translation. Find my name, and if I do? Daniel asked. What then? She was quiet for a long moment. I do not know, she admitted. I have spent 12,000 years running from my past. Perhaps it is time to stop running. She left his room without another word. Daniel sat down at his desk and looked at his notes. The damaged section stared back at him, A puzzle within a puzzle. Somewhere in those faded symbols was a name that had not been spoken in millennia. A name that could change the most feared being in the galaxy. Daniel picked up his pen and got back to work. He had a queen to save. The days blurred together as Daniel worked on the damaged section of the inscription. It was the hardest puzzle he had ever faced. The symbols were faded, worn away by thousands of years of time. Some were completely gone, leaving gaps in the text that he had to fill with guesswork and intuition. But slowly, piece by piece, the message revealed itself. The ancient writers had known exactly what they were doing. They had used their own language, a tongue that the Naktari conquerors could not read, to preserve a record of the past. They had written about the war, about the betrayal of the old rulers, about the young warrior who had risen up to save her people, and they had written about who that warrior really was. The queen visited Daniel every night now. She would sit in the corner of his room and watch him work, her dark eyes following every movement of his pen. She rarely spoke during these visits. She did not need to. They had moved beyond the need for words. Sometimes she would bring him food from her own table, delicacies from worlds he had never heard of. Sometimes she would bring old books from the archives, texts that might help with his translation. Once, she brought him a blanket because she had noticed he was cold. It was strange to see the terror of the galaxy performing such small acts of kindness. But Daniel was starting to understand that the monster and the person were not as separate as the queen wanted to believe. "I spoke with your captain today," the queen said one evening. Breaking her usual silence, Daniel looked up from his work. "Is she well?" "She is healthy, stubborn. She demanded that I release you and the rest of the crew." The queen smiled slightly. "I admire her courage, even if I find it annoying." "Lisa is a good leader," Daniel said. "She cares about her people." "Yes." The queen was quiet for a moment. "I cared about my people once, before I became what I am." Daniel set down his pen. "You still care. That is why you have not hurt any of us. That is why you are sitting here, watching me work, instead of conquering another world or drinking the blood of your enemies." The queen looked at him with something that might have been gratitude. "You see too much, Daniel Carter. It is unsettling." "I am a linguist," he said. "I am trained to see patterns that others miss." "And what pattern do you see in me?" Daniel thought carefully before answering. "I see someone who is very tired," he said. "Someone who has been playing a role for so long that she has forgotten it is a role. Someone who is ready to stop pretending." The queen stood and walked to the window, her back to him. "And if I stop pretending, what then? I have ruled through fear for 12,000 years. I have enemies on every world, beings who would destroy me the moment they sensed weakness. If I let go of the monster, I will die." "Maybe," Daniel said. "Or maybe you will finally start living." She turned to face him, and for the first time, he saw tears in her eyes. Naktari tears were clear, like human tears, not the blood tears he had read about in stories. "You make it sound so simple," she said. "It is not simple," Daniel admitted. "Nothing important ever is. But you are the most powerful being I have ever met. If anyone can find a new way to exist, it is you." The queen said nothing. She just stood there, looking at him with those ancient eyes, and Daniel could see the war happening inside her. The monster fighting against the person it had buried long ago. Finally, she asked, "Have you found my name yet?" Daniel nodded slowly. He had finished the translation that morning, but he had been waiting for the right moment to tell her. Now, looking at her face, he knew the moment had come. "Yes," he said. "I found it." The queen went completely still. Even her breathing stopped, though Daniel knew the Naktari did not need to breathe. "Tell me," she whispered. "I will," Daniel said. "But not here. Not like this. When I speak that name, I want it to mean something. I want it to be a beginning, not an ending. What do you mean? Daniel stood and walked toward her. He was not afraid, even though every instinct should have been screaming at him to run. Tomorrow is the anniversary of your coronation, the day you became the Crimson Sovereign. You will hold court, and all your servants and subjects will be there to honor you. Yes, the Queen said slowly. What of it? I want you to bring my crew to the throne room. I want you to hold a formal audience with everyone watching. And then, in front of your entire court, I will tell you your name. The Queen stared at him. You want me to show weakness in front of my subjects? In front of beings who have spent centuries waiting for a chance to overthrow me? No, Daniel said. I want you to show strength. Real strength. The strength to face your past, to accept who you really are in front of everyone who fears you. That is not weakness. That is the bravest thing anyone could do. They will think I have gone mad, the Queen said. They will think you have poisoned my mind with human tricks. Some will, Daniel agreed. But others will see something they have never seen before. A queen who is not afraid of her own history. A ruler who has the courage to be honest. That is more powerful than any army. The Queen was silent for a long time. Daniel could see her processing his words, weighing them against 12,000 years of survival instincts. You are asking me to risk everything, she finally said. My throne, my empire, my life. For what? For a name I cannot even remember? For a chance to be free, Daniel said quietly. For a chance to be yourself again, after all this time. The Queen closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had changed. The mask was still there, but it was thinner now, almost transparent. Very well, she said. Tomorrow, in front of my court, you will speak my name, and we will see what happens. She left his room without another word. Daniel sat back down at his desk and looked at the name he had written on his final page of notes. Velarath. It was a beautiful name, soft and strong at the same time. It meant one who brings the dawn in the old Naktari language, the tongue that had been forgotten when the current empire rose. Tomorrow, that name would be spoken aloud for the first time in 12,000 years. Tomorrow, the Vampire Queen would face her past. Daniel had no idea what would happen after that. But for the first time since he had been captured, he felt something that might have been hope. He carefully folded his notes and placed them in his pocket. Then he lay down on his bed and tried to sleep, knowing that the next day would change everything. Outside his window, the stars continued their endless dance, indifferent to the small dramas of mortals and immortals alike. But somewhere in that vast darkness, the universe seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what a single whispered name could do. The anniversary celebration filled the throne room with beings from across the Naktari Empire. Nobles in their finest blood-red robes stood in careful rows. Military commanders wore armor polished to a mirror shine. Servants moved through the crowd, carrying trays of dark wine that Daniel did not want to think about too carefully. And at the far end of the room, on her throne of ancient bones, sat the Crimson Sovereign. She was dressed in a gown of pure black today, a change from her usual crimson. Daniel wondered if that meant something. A symbol of mourning, perhaps, or of endings. Or maybe just a new beginning, wearing a different color than the past. The human prisoners were brought in last. Captain Lisa Monroe walked at the front, her head high despite weeks of captivity. Behind her came the rest of the crew, all 41 of them, looking thin and tired but alive. The Queen had kept her word. She had not hurt them. Daniel stood apart from the others, in a place of honor near the throne. The court whispered when they saw this. A human, dressed in fine Naktari clothes, standing where only the Queen's most trusted advisors were allowed. It was unheard of. The ceremony began with the usual rituals. Speeches praising the Queen's power. gifts presented by trembling ambassadors, blood sacrifices that made Daniel look away, even though he understood they were symbolic now. Animals rather than people. Then the queen raised her hand, and the room fell silent. "Before we continue," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space, "there is a matter I must address." She stood and descended from her throne. Every eye followed her as she walked toward Daniel. The court held its breath. Was she going to execute him? Reward him? No one could guess what the Crimson Sovereign would do. "This human," she said, gesturing to Daniel, "came to my empire as a prisoner, a member of a diplomatic mission that I captured for my own amusement. He is small and weak and strange. He cannot fight. He cannot scheme. He cannot even hold a conversation without getting distracted by inscriptions on walls." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Daniel said nothing. He just stood there, waiting. But this small, weak, strange creature has done something that no one in my empire has achieved in 12,000 years, the queen continued. He has translated the ancient inscriptions that cover this palace, the words left behind by the people we conquered, in a language we could not read. The laughter stopped. Now the court was very quiet, very still. Those inscriptions contained a record of history. The true history, not the version I created. They told of the war, the betrayal, the rise of a new ruler. And they preserved something that I tried very hard to destroy. She turned to face Daniel directly. They preserved my name. My real name, the one I was given before I became what I am now. The court erupted in shocked whispers. This was impossible. The queen's true name had been erased from all records, forbidden on pain of death. To speak it was the greatest crime in the empire. "Silence," the queen commanded, and silence fell instantly. She looked at Daniel with those endless black eyes. "You promised to speak my name in front of everyone, to make it mean something. This is your moment, Daniel Carter. Do what you came to do." Captain Lisa stepped forward. "Daniel, what is happening? What have you done?" Daniel did not answer her. He walked toward the queen until they were standing face to face, close enough to touch. The court watched in stunned silence. "Are you ready?" Daniel asked softly. "No," the queen said. "But do it anyway." Daniel leaned close to her ear. The court held its breath. Some guards reached for their weapons, ready to strike him down if he tried to harm their queen. And then, in a voice just loud enough for everyone to hear, Daniel whispered a single word: "Valorith." The effect was immediate and absolute. The queen's entire body went rigid. Her eyes, those pools of darkness that had terrified countless species, filled with something no one had ever seen in them before: recognition, memory, pain. "Valorith," Daniel said again, louder this time. "One who brings the dawn. That was your name, before you buried it beneath blood and fear. That was who you were." Tears began to stream down the queen's face. Not blood, as the legends claimed. Clear tears, like any human would cry. She fell to her knees in front of Daniel, in front of her entire court, and she wept. "I remember," she whispered. "Oh, stars above, I remember everything." The court was in chaos. Nobles shouted at each other. Guards did not know whether to attack Daniel or protect their queen. Some beings tried to flee, while others pressed closer, desperate to see what was happening. Captain Lisa pushed through the crowd and reached Daniel's side. "What is going on? What did you do to her?" "I gave her back her past," Daniel said quietly. "The past she tried to destroy. She needed to remember who she was before she could become someone new." The queen looked up at him through her tears. "The victims," she said, her voice broken. "The people I conquered, the ones who wrote those inscriptions. They wanted this. They wanted someone to find my name and use it against me." "No," Daniel said gently. He knelt down so he was at her level. He knelt down so he was at her level. They wanted someone to find your name and give it back to you. They were not trying to hurt you, Valorith. They were trying to save you. Save me? After everything I did to them? Some beings believe in forgiveness, Daniel said. Some beings believe that even the worst monster can find its way back to the light. They left your name as a gift, not a weapon. They hoped that someday, someone would help you remember how to be a person again. The queen stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked the court even more than her tears. She laughed odd. It was not her usual cold, cruel laughter. This was warm and surprised and almost human. The laughter of someone who has just realized that the universe is stranger and kinder than they ever imagined. You humans are remarkable, she said, wiping her eyes. You come to my empire as prisoners, and somehow you end up rescuing me from myself. She stood, and though her face was still wet with tears, there was something different about her now. Something lighter. The mask of the Crimson Sovereign was still there, but it fit differently. It was no longer a prison. It was just one of many faces she could wear. I am Valorith, she announced to her court, her voice strong and clear. I was Valorith before I was the Crimson Sovereign, and I'm Valorith still. I forgot that name for 12,000 years, but today, a human helped me remember it. She turned to the crowd, and her dark eyes swept across every face. The old ways are finished, she said. I built this empire on fear and blood, but fear and blood are not the only things that hold power together. Today, I begin a new chapter. A chapter where my name is spoken freely, where my past is not hidden, where my people do not have to be afraid of me. She looked at Captain Lisa and the human crew. These humans came seeking a treaty. They will have one. Better than one. They will have an alliance. The Noctari and the humans will work together, as equals, to build something better than either of us could build alone. The court was silent. No one knew how to respond to this. The Crimson Sovereign, the terror of the galaxy, was offering friendship instead of fear. Then, slowly, one noble began to clap. Then another. Then more. Soon the entire throne room was filled with applause, hesitant at first, but growing stronger. Not everyone was happy. Daniel could see that. Some faces were dark with anger and suspicion, but most were relieved, even grateful. They had been afraid of their queen for so long. Now, for the first time, they had a chance to love her instead. Valorith walked back to her throne and sat down, but she did it differently now. Not like a predator surveying her prey, but like a leader looking at her people. Daniel Carter, she said. Come here. Daniel approached the throne and bowed his head. Yes, my queen? No, she said. Not my queen. Call me by my name. Say it again. Daniel smiled. Yes, Valorith. She smiled back, and it was the most genuine smile he had ever seen on her face. Stay, she said. Stay here, in my court, as my advisor. Help me learn how to be the person I forgot I was. Help me build the empire I should have built 12,000 years ago. Daniel thought about it for a moment. Then he looked at Captain Lisa, who nodded slowly. I would be honored, he said. And so the strangest alliance in galactic history began. A vampire queen who had found her name and a human linguist who had helped her find it. The universe was changing, and for the first time in a very long time, it was changing for the better, because that is what humans do. They find the things that have been lost. They solve the puzzles that others have given up on. And sometimes, with nothing more than a whispered name, they remind even the oldest monsters how to be human again. The stars continued their eternal dance, but now there was a new song playing among them. A song of hope and alliance and a queen named Valorith who had finally remembered how to bring the dawn.